panel for the City of Toronto. This afternoon, we have 3 projects that we're going to be reviewing, but before we start, I just wanted to, first of all, thank everybody for joining us this afternoon, and to let you know that these sessions are being recorded. Now, they're also being live streamed, and just to let everybody know that I believe that the sessions themselves are live streamed and the break in between. So if people could keep that in mind as we make our way through the afternoon, that would be great. Before we get started, we're going to start with the land acknowledgement, and Valeria Maurizio will give us that acknowledgement. Valeria, over to you.
Thank you. 1 second.
Okay.
Technical difficulties.
That's okay.
Okay, let me go. Thank you. We acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit and is within the territory of the Dish with One Spoon Treaty.
Thank you very much. So we're going to move on to agenda item number 1, which is Lawrence Heights Community Recreation Center and Child Care Center. This is a city infrastructure project, and it also includes the first review of the Lawrence Heights Community Recreation Center and Child Care Center. We're going to devote an hour and 15 minutes to this review, and it is considered a pre-application session that we're having. So to panel members, there will be no vote, but there will be plenty of time for comments. And we're going to use our typical approach where we have a 10-minute presentation by staff, and then the proponent team will follow up with a 15-minute presentation, and then we'll have discussion after that, and we'll have closing remarks in terms of some of the highlights of the conversation. And as I mentioned earlier, this is being live streamed, and you can access through the City Planning YouTube channel recordings of this session and the other ones this afternoon. So before we get started, I'm going to move over to the panel members and just do a roll call. If I call your name, I will call your name. Just let me know that you're here and whether you have any conflict of interest. And we'll start with Meg.
Here, no conflict.
Thanks, Meg. Jessica?
Here, no conflict.
Thanks, Jessica. Juhi?
Here, no conflict.
Thank you. Heather?
Here, no conflict.
Thank you, Heather. Michael?
Here, no conflict.
Thank you. Jim Goff?
I'm here, no conflict.
Thank you, Jim. Joe?
I'm also here, no conflict.
Thank you, Joe. Ralph?
Here, no conflict.
Thanks, Ralph. And Paul?
Here, no conflict.
Okay, are there any other panel members present that I've missed? Okay, great, we can get started. So give me just a moment here. And we'll move on to the city staff and presentation. I'll give you a moment to bring your presentation up onto the screen. And when you're ready, I'll then let you know how much time you have.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Valeria Maurizio. I'm a community planner.
And Valeria, I'm just going to cut in for a second then. You have a total of 10 minutes. At the 10-minute mark, I'll gently butt in and let you know you have a minute left. The floor is yours.
Thanks very much. I will be starting the city staff component of the presentation. However, I am joined by my colleagues Michael Sokolowskis in Urban Design and James Cho in Parks, Forestry, Recreation. To give a brief overview of the planning policies, here is the City of Toronto official plan land use map for this area. The site is outlined in
I'm
red.
sorry. Okay, great. It's on screen now.
Can you see? Okay.
Yes.
Maybe there's a delay.
Okay. No problem.
The site is outlined in red here. It is just to the east side of the Allen Road, south of the 401, south of Rainey in the broader Lawrence Heights community. The site is partially designated apartment neighborhoods and partially designated parks in the official plan. Community centers, recreation facilities are permitted uses in the plan. This is also included in the Lawrence Allen Secondary Plan, which is a secondary plan adopted in 2011, and it provides direction for the revitalization efforts of the broader 100-acre Lawrence Heights community, which is mostly a 1950s developed low-rise social housing development of approximately 1,200 rent-geared-to-income units owned by Toronto Community Housing Corporation, or TCHC. The secondary plan sets the overall framework for this redevelopment, including revitalization and reinvestment in community facilities such as a new community center, new parks, a realigned road network, as well as upgraded services to support a mixed-use, mixed-income, transit-supportive, complete community. The TCHC lands are the focus of this secondary plan area, and the physical structure of this focus area is the community commons, which is outlined in that dashed circle. This is meant to be surrounded by residential uses around the community commons. It is meant to be a hub of local activity and public life in the neighborhood, including amenities, services, and facilities to draw residents together, and meant to be anchored by a community park, community facilities, schools, and new connective streets. In terms of where we are to date, phase 1, which is under construction and partially complete, happened at the north end of the focus area, kind of from Rainey, and then as you move your way south towards the northeastern district. The site, which is again outlined in red, is what is known as phase 2A. It has been advanced as part of the earlier phase before the continuation of phases 2 and 3, which would happen south of the site towards Lawrence Avenue West. The plan is to build a community center on this site. However, the road network to support it, which includes the extension of Varna Road to provide access and servicing to the site, as well as to construct a remainder of a development block, is being processed concurrently and is in a parallel process with this site plan application for the community center. It is being delivered by TCHC to construct the roads and the services for this site. And the intent would be to have access and servicing from the Varna Road Drive extension, as you can see here, where it hugs the site from day 1 of the community center opening. With that, I will pass it on to Michael to discuss the public realm policies.
Thanks, Valeria. This is the public realm structure map blown up. You can see the site in context as it addresses particular view termini and public realm, surrounding public realm. Can you go to the next slide, please? The Lawrence Allen Secondary Plan also implemented additional plans and guidelines. This is an extract from the 2016 Public Realm Master Plan done by Perkins and Will, the PFNR. And you can see the site in context with the surrounding public realm structure and vision. It's important to note that the Community Recreation Center, it is outside of the Allen Greenway to the east of the Allen Expressway. So the site itself does not include that aspect, which connects the larger community that would come at a later phase. Next slide, please. And the site in context, you can see is partially within the current Flemington Park, across from the Flemington Public School, as Valeria said. Phase 2 will introduce new streets and residential, as well as this community center. Next slide, please. And just showing some current views of the site. The site is further south here when viewed from Varna. You can see the adjacent phase 1 development that is currently under construction, nearly finished, I believe. Next slide, please. Looking north on Varna, panel can just get an idea of the evolving streetscape that will be occurring along Varna as you move south. Next slide, please. Another view of phase 1 development as you look southeast towards Turtle Island Drive, the new street, and the community center would be to the right of this image. Next slide, please. And as I had mentioned, the Public Realm Master Plan does give some direction for design principles related to the community center, other civic buildings in the neighborhood. And as I've indicated, the CRC site will be adjacent to the proposed Allen Greenway, which this slide shows a view south along the Allen Expressway sound wall. The CRC site would be roughly where those cars are in the middle of the image. Next slide, please. And I'll hand it to James Cho from Parks, Forestry and Recreation.
Yeah, thank you. I'll briefly go over the community engagement and project overview. So this slide, I won't go. This is basically showing what our team is. I won't go into detail, but forestry is broken into many different pieces, and we have our consultants and we have an engagement team. Next slide, please. In this overview of the community engagement process for the new center, there were 2 rounds of pre-engagement that accumulated into 22 meetings with key shareholders. The community engagement phase 1 visioning begun in fall of last year, 2023, and concluded in the beginning of this year, 2024. In this phase, we reached out to the community to solicit feedback in various community meetings, community pop-ups, and online surveys. We took what we heard and translated it into proposed programs, visions, guiding principles, and big moves. This phase concluded in the Community Advisory Committee Meeting 1 and finalized the overall vision of the community. Community engagement phase 2, exploring options, is where we are now in the community engagement. This is where a draft design is created, which is based on what we heard in phase 1. This phase is still ongoing, but we have already reached out to the community in Community Advisory Committee Meeting 2, Indigenous Sharing Meeting 2. Further outreach is planned for online surveys, community pop-ups, youth-focused pop-ups, and flyers for distribution and interviews. Lastly, we'll be going back to the community in phase 3, setting the direction to present the community preferred design, which will be used for the preparations of the detailed design, working drawings, permit drawings, and tender documents. This will eventually lead to the construction of the new center, anticipated to be completed in 2028. Next slide, please. In this slide, I wanted to show the guiding principles that was created from the phase 1 community engagement. It's used to assist in the general direction of the program and uses in the new center and inform the overall conceptual design of the new center. The principles are: the center is to be open to all ages and accessible to diverse abilities, be flexible for activities, respect the unique needs of the communities, create a modern space, incorporate natural light and materials, includes the local and indigenous art, accommodate the arts, cultural, and music, science, and technology, respect and embrace the importance of food, accommodate access to technology, be a safe place for the community, and integrate indigenous design, keeping in mind indigenous placekeeping in city spaces. Next, please.
James, you have 1 minute left. Well, is that enough time for you?
Well, okay. Well, I'll finish this off and then I'll see what I can do. Okay. Also, I wanted to quickly speak to the big moves, which is a refinement of the guiding principles. This aids in clearly defined intention, use of spaces in the new center, and assists in future programming and operation in the new center. So I won't go into this. Hopefully everyone has seen this. The main focus is that we're providing a lot of youth space, a lot of multi-purpose space, and aquatics and fitness. And we're also addressing the indigenous design, cultural needs, and the environmental sustainability of the building. Next slide. In this overview, we're going over the location of the new center. As shown in yellow, that's the location of the new center just north of Flemington Public School. It was chosen during the Lawrence Heights secondary plan process in 2011. And for the existing Lawrence Heights Community Center, it's shown purple. It will remain open until the center is constructed and open to the community. Next slide, please. First off, on this slide,
James, I'm going to give you sort of another minute and a half.
Oh, that's great.
Okay.
I only have 2 slides left. That's great. Thanks. First of all, I wanted to say that although Toronto Community Housing is leading the tenant relocation, we wanted to provide context to the panel of the relationship between the new center and the existing tenant housing. The new center and the proposed Varnum Drive extension will impact existing Toronto Community Housing properties. The yellow-orange area in the screen shows the site of the new center, and the purple line shows proposed new road and infrastructure to connect and service the new center. As a result, the Leah Lane and Beckett Court tenant housing will be affected, and the tenants will need to be relocated. The tenants will have the choice to relocate to new tenant housing within the community that Toronto Community Housing is building in the Lawrence Heights revitalization. Next slide. This is my last slide. I just wanted to say that the center responds to the community and Indigenous engagement feedback and is planned to be a net zero emissions facility with minimum parking provided. What is included in the new center is shown on the screen, so I won't go over that. But I just wanted to say that significant thought was put into design of the spaces, such as aquatics, active fitness, indoors and outdoors, multi-purpose uses, youth, food, and childcare spaces. Thank you. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks to all three of you for the presentation. We're going to move on now to the proponent team, and just give you a moment to load your presentation onto the screen. And if you could give just a very quick introduction of the members of the proponent team that are with us this afternoon, and then move on from there. You'll have a total of 15 minutes, and at the 14-minute mark, I'll remind you of your timing.
Great. Can you see my screen?
I can see you, but not your screen yet.
We can, though. I think there's a bit of a lag on some screens, but.
Okay, I'll start then. So my name's Ryan Jurjich. I'm project architect at CSNP. I'm here with Susan and Peter from CSNP, as well as Robert from Turo and Fung from PMA. So just to start, the city gave good background on the site, but really what we wanted to show was currently our site sort of sits within this existing 1950s context, and the revitalization plan really kind of transforms this site, introducing through roads to try to connect this neighborhood back to its surrounding context, buildings that now relate to the street in the public realm rather than relating to open space, as well as creating a pedestrian-friendly environment, introducing bike lanes, more public transit, links over the Allen Expressway. You can see a proposed bridge there, which was included in the master plan to help tie together these two sides. So really this idea of connectivity was something that we wanted to tie into as well. And here's just a 3D massing from the master plan showing the intent of building a street wall along Varna as well. So again, having the buildings help to animate, supervise the streets, relating to the streets was something that our proposal was looking at as well. I also just want to mention to the south is the existing Flemington Public School, which for the foreseeable future will remain, but is also slated for redevelopment within that site. And you can see here highlighting on one of the master plan slides that south of our site is meant to be a large community park, which actually continues over to the other side of the Allen and is connected by this new pedestrian link and bridge. And so this is something that our design is adjacent to and will connect to. And then further strengthening kind of the pedestrian networks. This slide is just showing the pedestrian and bike lanes throughout the site. So the intention for, again, less of a vehicular focused area and more of a pedestrian accessed area. The site itself sits between two subway stops, Lawrence to the south and Yorkdale to the north. So it will be well served by public transit. There will be a bus along Varna Road as well and a bus stop in front of the center. So James touched on the program, and really what this slide is meant to show is that we have an aquatic center, a gym, fitness, weights, a number of activity, multi-purpose rooms. We also have an 88 space childcare on this site as well with its dedicated outdoor space. And we also have a number of outdoor amenity spaces and which have arisen with collaboration with the community as well. So when we're looking at our 1 hectare site, it starts to get tight pretty quickly. And that's why you'll see we've actually gone with a multi-story rec center for this site. So just looking at some planning diagrams and concepts that we're tying into. So I mentioned the street wall. So again, using our building to help support the street network and the street wall, helping to animate the public realm of the area. And then again, developing a plan that deals with the school to the south. Again, the future of it or the timing is unknown. So we're creating a green buffer between our building and the school to work with the current stage. And then in the future stage, when this area becomes a larger community park with these path networks working through it, the building can still relate to that future development. That then pushes the servicing access and parking to the north in order to ensure that vehicular traffic does not interfere with the pedestrian realm. We also wanted to identify a major kind of community hub, open sort of plaza for the community as well at the toe of this shoe-shaped site, which also worked with the key sort of termini in the area as well as the major path networks that are identified. We're also looking at taking the major programmatic features of the rec center, so the aquatics, the gym, looking at showcasing them. We're actually looking at stacking them on top of each other to create some height. The height allows visibility throughout the neighborhood, really establishing the building as kind of this central beacon for the community. And also, again, it supports the street wall and animating the public realm. The multi-purpose spaces we're looking at locating to the south to take advantage of natural daylight as well as the future relationship to that green community space. And then the childcare itself actually operates a little bit like a separate building. So it wants to have a separate identity in the quieter part of the site. So it's located to the west, and it also has its own private green space and relationship to the service road. So this is just a high-level summary of the kind of layout of the site and how we arrived at that. So now I'm going to turn it over to Robert to go through these slides.
Thanks, Ryan. Hi, everyone. Robert from True Architect here. I'll be speaking a bit to the cultural narrative that our project team has put together. So the big move is to reference a sense of place and honor the once historic natural site that Lawrence Heights occupies. So for context, the historic Lawrence Heights Plain rests on the tableland that divides the Humber and Don watersheds. The heavy soils of the plain once supported rich hardwood forests and a thriving ecosystem which was lost. Our proposed architectural expression, which will be shown in later slides by Ryan, references this condition through a sculpted, multifaceted stone base honoring the tableland it stands on. The upper stories of the building are going to be intentionally expressed as a treehouse-like structure, and that's going to reference that lush hardwood forest that I just mentioned in that historic naturalized site. You can just go next slide, please, Ryan. So these diagrams begin to graphically show us the relationship between the new master plan on the far right and the once naturalized site on the far left. As a team, we thought this was really important to show because we appreciate the master plan's efforts in reconnecting the site and establishing a greater sense of openness and green space. And this is something that the proposed architecture really strives to reinforce. Next slide, please. So these following diagrams will speak to the rationale behind our orientation of our building and the ways that we see them as aligning with Indigenous design values. So the diagram you see here is sort of a critique on Western city planning and ways of thinking. Development in Toronto has historically followed the colonial grid, which is 16.7 degrees off of true north. Next slide, please. So in an abstract way, we're almost reimagining the city grid and realigning ourselves with true north in those cardinal directions. So rotating 16.7 degrees. Next slide, please. And yeah, so this slide really shows how that's expressed in our reaction to those early slides. We're skewing the building and aligning major interior arteries and corridors with the cardinal directions, really embracing and welcoming in Earth's gifts, the morning, midday, and evening sun. And I'll pass it back to Ryan. Thanks.
Thanks, Robert. So moving to our site plan. So continuing with what Robert was mentioning, we looked at the site through the lens of this tableland and forest idea, and looked at a landscape design that was more naturalized and more sort of carved out of a forest. And the building itself, again, as Robert was mentioning, the orientation is aligned with these sort of central court circulation paths on the inside of the building are orientated with true north and east and west. And we have kind of three main access points to the site to pick up on the different ways that people approach the building. So on the north is the vehicular and service access. So there is 14 parking spaces dedicated to staff and short-term drop-off. The east side of the building is really more of the pedestrian realm. We have that community square, which would be a flexible space, as well as a more intimate ceremonial fire pit. And then along around the south entrance there, picking up people moving from the linear park or the school parking area to the south there. We have a multi-sport court, playground areas, as well as the outdoor areas for the childcare. So just moving to the plan layout. So again, it's kind of a pinwheel plan. We have a control desk located central so that it has optimal views of each entry point for safety and security. You can see a large portion of this plan is taken up by the aquatics program, 6-lane lap pool, a therapy tank, which is supported by 2 family change rooms. The multi-purpose rooms on the south there, we're showing 3 actually divisible rooms, as well as a community kitchen. The importance of food and food security in this area has come up a number of times, and there actually would be a food bank run out of this center as well. Also making sure that these rooms have access to the exterior was an important factor as well. And then on the left there in the pink, you can see the childcare area. Again, somewhat operates as its own building with its own private entrance, but also has access point to use the community center as well. So moving to the second floor, and just wanted to also touch on the fanning and shaping of this corridor system to allow for a bit of a wider corridor area for social interaction, study bar, lounge furniture as well. This level here is really a number of multi-purpose rooms and activity rooms. We also have a dance studio on this level as well. And the admin areas, as well as the second floor of the childcare. So the childcare is a 2-story space. And then moving to the third floor, the building actually steps back, allowing for the roof area to be used as an active roof. This is really our sort of active level in entirety, with the gym, the fitness, the weights, youth. Youth has been another major factor in our community engagement. So making sure we're providing a dedicated youth space with a recording studio, tech spaces, a youth lounge, a double height youth lounge, and also a dedicated outdoor youth space as well. Also on this roof, we have a barbecue, social space, areas for planting, gardening, fitness equipment, a multi-purpose lawn that can be used for yoga or movie nights, and as well as a walking track. And then just moving to the fourth floor, really this level is the mezzanine level for the running track, which is accessed by one of the convenience stairs or the double elevator. So tying into what Robert was speaking about with the tablelands and the forest, really with our volume of this building, it is a 4-story building that steps back at the upper 2 levels. And we saw this podium structure as kind of part of that tableland. So this kind of building rising out of the earth, sort of stretching out to the community around it. And then sitting on top of that, the upper 2 floors, is this treehouse-like structure, which we thought was sort of a playful concept for a community center. And really that last diagram at the bottom there is looking at carving and shaping that base to allow for entry views, and also making more pedestrian-friendly massing in certain areas. So then this is one of the views looking from the north along Varna Road. And again, you can see the shaping of the base using a stone-like cladding material, carving out areas for glazing and views into the pool, as well as the access point off of the service road there on the right. And then sitting on top of this kind of sloped landscape is this treehouse form, expressing the heavy timber structure and materiality behind, and really the shaping of the bracing kind of echoing the forest-like nature of what was once on this site. And just moving around the building, you can see that the sloping of that facade is purposeful to sort of cut down the volume as we get to that community plaza on the left there, and also allowing in clear story lighting into the pool space. And this is a view from that community plaza, again, really meant to be a multi-purpose space. The landscape sort of creating kind of more carved out area for the community. And in the background, you can see the structure of the building sort of representing, tying into the trees, and then also the carving of the base, again, for views into the aquatics and the entry point.
Ryan, you'd have
Yep.
1 minute left. Is that going to work for you?
Yeah, I think I'm okay. Thanks.
Good. Thank you.
And then continuing to the south again, just carving out the base for glazing to the multi-purpose rooms and the entry. And just following through with the interior views, again, echoing this idea of this carved out stone base. This is the entry lobby with the feature stair. The pool itself sits within this base as well, and you can see how the sloped landscape or sloped facade allows for clear story daylight and reveals the structure holding the treehouse above. And then once you're in that upper treehouse volume, this is the double height use space, more of a heavy timber materiality, tying into that treehouse idea. And this is the gym space as well in the treehouse, revealing the wooden structure. And then just some building sections, again, speaking to sort of those two levels of the building and materiality, and also the stacking of the gym on top of the pool, with the lounge spaces facing the south, and the pool and the gym are taking more advantage of the northern light. Just quickly on sustainability, it is a net zero carbon building. TGS version 4, we're looking at using mass timber structure, renewable energy, geothermal PV, compact building shape, limited glazing, high performance building envelope, and also things like water reuse for irrigation on the site. And then just last slide, materiality. Again, the base being more of the stone of the earth, concrete cladding, concrete structure. And the upper volume being more of the treehouse, that warm material palette with heavy timber finishes and structure. And I think that's it for me.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation. Panel members, we're going to move on to questions of clarification. If you could raise your virtual WebEx hands, then I will know who wants to ask any questions. I don't see any hands so far.
I think Michael.
Okay, Heather, you're first.
Oops.
Michael, did you want to go ahead? Yep.
I'm sorry, Michael, I see your hand now.
It's okay. I lost so many interfaces. I didn't remember where the hand was. I fumbled there for a minute. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, a couple of questions. I think these are yes/no questions or yes/no answers. In your presentation, you mentioned stone-like cladding. In the booklet, they're concrete. They're concrete panels. I'm assuming they're concrete panels. And secondly, the expression of mass timber on the exterior, it's really rain screen cladding representing the mass timber, but it's not mass timber. That's question number 2. And number 3, confirming that there are no vehicle routes on the linear park against the Allen Expressway.
Yeah, so the cladding system we're looking at is high performance concrete, and by stone, like I mean that through the texture and materiality, we'd be looking at using something that that sort of echoes a stone material, and the upper cladding, as noted here, would be a warm colored or warm toned metal cladding, and this is a detail, but we're looking at a perforated system to give some depth to it as well. And the last question, I believe I can answer. The linear park is a pedestrian and route area. There wouldn't be laneway along it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michael. On to Heather, then Jim, Goff, and Joe. Heather.
Thank you. I was just wondering if in the section on page 27, where you're, I think, further sort of describing your party diagram, I'm just confirming, I think I know the answer, but there's no access to the roof from grade, is there?
No.
No. Okay, great. And then also just wondering, with respect to responding to the plan for the area and thinking about the either side of the Allen, I'm just wondering if you generated any views from the Allen or from the other side of the Allen, the west side, to see, you know, if we would see this lantern-like structure popping up.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the Allen Expressway is a bit sunken.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's about 10 or 15 feet lower. But that said, given the height of this building, and that each level is about 5 meters.
Yeah.
So it's it actually equals the height of these 8-story buildings. So it will be visible, and especially you can see across the road here, the master plan calls for another large open green space where this center will be visible. And this doesn't really show it here, but there is also a new bridge here meant to link this side. So this future green space will tie into this green space on the other side, so that this all feels as together as possible with an expressway running below it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Heather. On to Jim, and then Joe.
Yes, thank you. I'm just wondering, in terms of a landscape strategy, is a more detailed strategy still to come? Right now, the strategy seems fairly basic.
Fung, do you want to speak to that?
Oh yeah, most definitely a detailed strategy will come, but I think on a high level, anyways. Obviously, I think we did like as part of this approach to really kind of reinstate a lot more canopy trees, but certainly like I think very strategically on a high level anyway, strategically, we're going to select planters, kind of islands of areas in which we want to have more restorative ground cover planting, but then certainly also on a functional and kind of operational level, we will have some areas that will, the priority will be like kind of canopy trees, shade trees, that there will be 2 different typologies that we're still kind of working out with parks for sure, in terms of where we have like really rich restorative, ground cover successional planting versus the typology of obviously, for both, functional reasons, because we have a very tight site and we want people to kind of also use as much of the site, but the typology of trees in lawn as well. So that's still forthcoming for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. And then last but not least, Joe.
Thank you. I think 3 very quick questions. As one of the seniors on the panel, I was quite excited to see a senior play area labeled on the ground plan. So I'm curious to know more of that for sure, just briefly. Second question, if the architects could walk us through, appreciating there's many levels in this building and you've explained why. You briefly walk us through, if I'm a pedestrian arriving, I believe there are 3 entry points into the community center portion. How I find my way, if I'm using a stair, how I'm finding my way all the way up through. If somebody could just walk us through that. And my final question is, do you have, or could you just, the perspectives were not labeled, so I found it a little difficult to know where they were taken from. But is there a view from the community square to the building? And could you just, when you have a chance, put that on the screen? Thank you.
Sure. So just quickly, the senior is senior kids. Well, I'm not sure, Fung, if you want to elaborate on that, but that's a playground basically.
Yeah,
But
5 to 12-year-olds is
but I'm sure seniors can also come and enjoy that space as well.
I was getting all excited because I thought it was like, you know, plus 65. No, okay.
We'll take
all
that
right.
comment though, and we'll work with that. I think your next question.
We're going to be hanging out there. We got nothing else to do except, you know, chat, meet. So
That's right. As far as I think your second comment was about moving your way up through the building. So as I mentioned, this site is kind of accessed almost from all sides. So that's why we have these 3 points of entrance. We do have internal to the building, we do have a feature stair system which kind of winds your way up the building through the rock into the treehouse canopy, so or treehouse area. So that's this stair here that then brings you up to this level, and then there's another feature stair here that brings you up to this step back level, which this area here is the youth lounge area, with which another stair that brings you up to the 2-lane running track. All of the levels are accessed by the elevators as well. And just as far as interior views to show that. So this is that entry area from the north entrance with that stair on the ground floor. And this is a view of that youth lounge with the stair moving you up towards the, so it's a bit of a path through the building. It kind of makes you walk through the building and experience it to get to the top. And your last question, this is the view from the community square. So looking at the east facade, you have the pool and the gym stacked on top of each other, providing a backdrop for that area. And then this is that east entry point as well.
Yeah. Ryan, can I speak to the senior? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and just because there is an approach as well for sure, like in all of this, and certainly, you know, as we get more into the DD, but certainly there is an approach here too to make sure that there's like oodles and oodles of seating, like lots of opportunities for seating, you know, and that some of the edges to our major programming are also occupiable in themselves and have really, you know, wonderful like benches. So I mean, yeah, if you were to zoom in a little bit, you can see that, like, you know, sort of at, you know, intersections of these pedestrian paths, you know, outside of the main entrance ways to the building anyways, we have lots of opportunities for, you know, kind of seating and hopefully, like, you know, the community meeting and socializing and such. So definitely for sure thinking about the seniors, you know, using the center or coming through the site as well. So I just wanted to rest assured that, you know, even though the senior play was intended for 5 to 12-year-olds, for sure there's lots of places for seniors.
Thank you. Joe, all you'll need is your skateboard and the phone number of the nearest chiropractor, and you'll be fine. Now, I just have a couple of very quick questions. With the existing Flemington Public School to the, I'll call it sort of south, do you anticipate while the school is there that pathway that's in between the existing building and the new building being accessed by both, or is the school basically fenced off from what will happen along this east-west pathway?
So there is an existing fence here along this south property line, which the school we will need to rebuild or replace. There will still remain a fence here, which basically controls their play areas. But there is an existing access point here from their parking that is existing here as well, and there is an existing pathway and stair here as well. So that's how they would access the site. And then obviously the linear park provides a walkway along the west edge as well to access the site. Not sure if that answers your question.
Sort of. I'll move on. You had some intriguing references to Indigenous heritage relative to site plan and built form. Do you anticipate that more Indigenous heritage in a very visible way will be infused throughout the site, or what is your strategy moving forward?
Yeah, so working with two rows, so Brian and Robert, and Robert, feel free to jump in as well. We've developed this cultural narrative, the interest, sort of the materials, the use of materials, the orientation of the building, the use of kind of the natural gifts as well for the building are all directly coming from the Indigenous. And I think it was mentioned, we also have community engagement with the Indigenous community as well, and they have given us a number of comments that we're tying into. And another point is there will be Indigenous public art within this building as well. There will probably be a number of public art features, and so there will also be public art from artists of the local community as well. Robert, I'm not sure if you wanted to.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I think you did a good job covering sort of the high level and more metaphorical gestures we're doing, right, through the architecture and expressing it and really referencing place, Indigenous ways of thinking, embracing Mother Earth's gifts. I think the sustainability aspects that Ryan touched on in later slides, that also aligns strongly with Indigenous ways of thinking. To Ryan's point, there's going to be space for Indigenous art. There's also going to be space for art from different cultures and backgrounds. I mean, Lawrence Heights is a very multicultural community. So not only Indigenous art, there's going to be art for all walks of life. But in the landscape, we have space for ceremonial fire. We have youth spaces. There's also opportunities for markets. Through our Indigenous consultation, there's been an expression that pop-ups can happen here. There can be urban Indigenous events where vendors can come in and sell crafts or sell different foods. So really an exchange of culture and knowledge is going to happen here. And this is going to be a really great community hub where all that will happen. So yeah, we're not just thinking about indigeneity as art on the wall. We're thinking about it everywhere through the whole fabric of this building, right? So hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. Panel members, we're going to move on to panel discussion.
I have one quick question. Sorry.
Oh, my apologies, Ralph.
I have my hand up. It's okay. There are two quick questions. One is just wondering about the orientation, specifically to this drawing, actually. The western face of the daycare is a kind of line and orientations slightly angled. Can you explain where that came from? Is there a significance to that line? And then the second question is maybe for the city, this elephant in the room of Flemington Public School. I just want to know, is the master plan anticipate a relocation? Is there a space to relocate the school in future phases? And then can somebody just take a guess? Not going to hold anybody to it. Is it 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? If they don't have an intention on moving, is there a place for them to move? I'm assuming there is, but just want to kind of get some clarification on that.
Yeah, so first question related to the childcare. Again, as the childcare operates as a bit of a separate building, we're trying to locate it to the west, and sort of with its relationship to the main spine and its entry point, it kind of ended up with its majority of the facade facing west. But ideally, we did not want a facade that was facing directly south, as that would require a number of shading elements. So west still allows for some good daylight, but that is a little bit more controlled. As far as the question related to Flemington Public School, the intention is actually for it to be relocated within its current site, with the understanding that there will also be a community park on that site as well. So this area that's green here is still the site for the school, but it will be rebuilt within that site. So its exact location is not defined now, and I don't think we can give a idea of timing, unfortunately. It's one of the tricks of our project that we need to solve. James, I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything more to that.
Yeah, I want to say that just building on what Ryan's saying, that yes, we understand that the school will be relocated and rebuilt somewhere in this green zone that we're talking about. Right now, we don't have the we're not developed enough to actually tell you where. And we have been talking with TDSB, Toronto School District Board, about it. But as far as we know, there isn't any immediate plans of where they want to put it. So it actually goes beyond what we can tell you today.
Ryan, just one clarification. I was just wondering the angle of that wall, not the
the
line
angle.
thing. Yeah, like what set that, like everything else is kind of rockety rock, and then there's this kind of very determined slice in a different angle than
So this guy?
Poetic idea. Yeah. What sets that line and why that angle?
Yeah, so I mean, really what we were looking at doing with our circulation system was creating these fanned areas to widen that kind of more social space. And we were doing the same with the childcare. The circulation is kind of a bit tight here, but fans open to sort of a play area here and a play area here. And so that's following the angle of the fanning of the interior. That's sort of where that came from.
But there's no setback from the linear park or the owl that's
No,
breaks
we're
that
fairly
line.
yeah, we're fairly far from there, so that's not determined by a setback. No.
Maybe that could be, Ralph, a comment if you have one.
Yeah. No. I was just want to know
Yeah,
if there was something that I didn't know. Okay, great.
I'm going to suggest that we move on into panel discussion. Panel members, we have nine people, and I'm looking at the time. I'm going to suggest 2 minutes per person if you could self-manage your time. We're going to start with Heather, then Ralph, Juhi, Jessica, Joe, Jim Goff, Meg, and Michael, and then Paul. And I think I might have missed somebody in there, but let's get started. So we're starting with Heather, and again, self-managing, 2 minutes. And keep in mind the advice that the city team has asked of us for this project.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much for the presentation. I really firstly appreciate the kind of playful metaphor of the rock base and then the tree house on top, and appreciate actually one of the moves of pulling down that kind of rock-like podium to reveal that column-free floor that has the pool, and therefore that kind of complete underlighting of the second floor, I think really makes that upper volume feel like a lantern. So lots of appreciation for that idea. Also appreciate the presentation, hearing some additional information about the very important programming here with respect to food and food security. And I also really like what I see in the landscape plan so far. And one of the things I appreciate most is actually the blankness of the community plaza. I think that not having any kind of pre-programmed elements or limitations on that space makes it a really important kind of blank canvas for the community to just come in and kind of make it their own and have it be very flexible. With respect to the architectural expression, just a personal preference, but I really do like the metaphor of the stone, but I'm not sure that that's really translating to the architecture, and just wondering if you might include some kind of rougher texture. I like the kind of I don't really mean basic, but I mean like basic simplicity of the treehouse, and I find the podium a little bit kind kind of mannered and angly compared to that. So wondering if you might consider using, you know, a rougher form of precast concrete or something that's a bit more true to the vision. And then I think there's a lot more to be studied in the relationships of this project to the west. And it was great to hear that there might be a bridge over the Allen later. You know, maybe that bridge might even be on an angle to sort of speak to some of these Indigenous ideas that are baked in. I think it would be great to anticipate that and generate some views from this bridge, or even just floating, you know, in the Allen for now. Studying what this lantern looks like from the other side of the Allen, I think is very important. We were asked as a panel to comment on the strong and coherent relationship to the school. I don't really see that right now, but I'm not sure what the opportunities are, because there is a kind of, you know, fence, as you mentioned, and a couple of locations to interact with the new community center. But perhaps the solution could be in part found in this linear park that's uniting all of the properties on the west. I mean, maybe the pathway of this park just kind of, you know, bulges out a little bit right where the school and the community center merge, inviting people to kind of pause here and interact with that and kind of mix between the two programs, but not too much to comment on in that bucket. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Sorry, talking to myself. Heather, thank you. We're moving on to Ralph next.
Thank you, Gordon. And I want to say that I'm impressed as well with the thoughtful narrative. Really appreciate the effort, and quite excited about this. It's such a different approach to one of these facilities, and it's incredibly poetic. I kind of have to be honest. I'm struggling because you know, it's a tough site. Not only its specific conditions that are temporal, but also these questions about future relationships to a larger open space with maybe a reluctant partner to the south. So I do appreciate the rock analogy, and I really, really do love the lantern. This, I'm going to say, a stand of trees. I'd rather call it that than a lantern, because I think it's and I think the more it kind of looks like that and maybe a little less structural, I think it might be even more poetic. Where I'm kind of struggling with is the entrances, and that this rock is like it's really up right up against the Varna. And of course, I can appreciate why and how the program really does wrap around it, but maybe it needs to be a more obvious, like literally that rock existed and that we had to work around the rock. And so I think especially that southeast entrance, I struggle with that one, especially in the short term. It's almost like if there is a way that there could be a cleft of rock, a table rock that comes out to create a deeper canopy to allow people to feel that there is an entrance. It's not behind a very small kind of projection of a plinth over top of a stair that you get to this entrance. That entrance, I think, needs to come out more towards the east, addressing that community space. I understand. I completely, I think, agree with Heather that the nakedness, tabula rasa of that space is really important. I wonder why it needs to touch the pool glazing. I think that's more my issue, is that it just seems so kind of just there and not really having an edge on that side that is that is really kind of relating to it. I don't like that little storage room at the corner. I wish it didn't exist, so that somebody could actually walk from the sidewalk and be covered all the way around to the entrance on the southeast corner. Otherwise, I like it. I almost think that I wish the rock broke in half along Varna, because I'm just worried about the thinness of the rock podium with the wall above. They're so close together that it might look like a facade, a thin facade, and not a rock. It's almost like it was cracked. The last thing I was going to say is just this infrastructure piece on the north side. I just, I'm kind of struggling with putting surface parking spots for staff. I'm really struggling. It's a lot of asphalt. If we didn't have them, maybe just for accessible spaces, I think that should be it. It should be a great drop off. That whole bus turnaround is such a old school, odd reality. If you got rid of parking, you could create a much tighter one and just add to the open space along the linear park. That's an enormous paved area for just one action, and I think it's really unfortunate. So that's it. I look forward to seeing this kind of evolve. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ralph. We're going to move on to Juhi next.
Thank you. From a sustainability perspective, I mean, the city has been doing a really fantastic job in creating this zero carbon community center. So I really look forward to this building itself. I think the location of the programming is really great from sustainability perspective. Again, like placing the swimming pool and the gym on the north side, with the larger grazing on the north side and limiting the sun exposures will really help to support the net zero goals. I understand that the intent is to further develop the exterior areas. I really look forward to how that will evolve, as the current state does seem slightly underdeveloped compared to the inside of the building. I will add to Joe's earlier question that I did think that the play area were for seniors, and I got really excited when I saw that various programming happening. I think, last comment, I do think the South pedestrian cycling connection has to work on its own successfully in case the public school doesn't move or get rebuilt in the exact same spot. It does feel like a back alley at the current state. I'm mainly concerned from just safety and visibility of this connection that's happening on the backside of the building, and almost would love to see sort of the same sensitivity you apply to the interior circulation spaces, where you're fanning it out and you're creating gathering spaces on top of circulations. And that type of thinking get applied to the exterior circulation spaces as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Juhi. We're going to move on next to Joe and then Jessica.
Thanks, Gordon. I'll be brief, I think. I really like the evolution of the project and echo or just support and reinforce some of the positive comments you've heard thus far. It's a special project that comes across and lovingly cared for thus far. So wonderful to see all of it. There are 2 or 3 aspects I would suggest maybe need further attention in the evolution. One is the combination of observations around the community square at the east end and the entrance at the southeast corner. I think perhaps, as Ralph has suggested, I agree that that entrance on the southeast corner, I think, is going to be far more prominent and dominant than implied in the plan, where the entrances to the west, to the north, and the south seem to have a lot more dimension to them. I may not know the community that well, but in its further, its final arrangement, but it seems like a logical place as a pedestrian to come down, what is it called, Hoyo Terrace from the north, or down Varna Road and come in that way, as opposed to the childcare entry kind of side of things. And I agree with Ralph's point about that entrance feeling a bit hidden, and the opportunity of providing maybe some cover as you come from Varna Road and extending a canopy, doing something there to provide more visibility and more prominence to that entry. And I think, and then internal planning, if that entry is in fact, if that entry becomes the most dominant entry point, it's a long way from the control desk, and you could get immediate access to a stair going up. So there may or may not be a security question in that arrangement. So I'm not, I don't have a solution to that, but that would just be an observation. The second is around the definition of the community square. I don't disagree I'm not suggesting it get filled with things. And I agree with the comments thus far about it needing to be open and accessible, but to me, it's a little underdeveloped. It lacks a kind of definition and character. I do like the view into the pool. I like the view into the gym, but that doesn't mean that there couldn't be more trees around the perimeter, that you don't actually potentially access that space by going through a line of trees. I don't think you need a big opening, for example. There's no vehicles going in there. So I would suggest more effort and work on the definition and character of that community square and how it relates to that southeast entrance. And I would also just, in a modest way, support Ralph's observations about the childcare parking, the amount of territory, how that all works, and if that can be minimized or improved in some fashion. But otherwise, it's a really great project coming along very nicely. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Moving on then to Jessica and then Jim.
Thanks, Gordon. Thank you very much for your presentation. This is a very exciting and important project for a neighborhood that's undergoing quite a bit of change. I really appreciate the amount of space given to the exterior childcare area and then the adjacent public play spaces, and how that will then all work and link to the linear park that really links the north-south connection. It might be difficult for parents to get their kids to head home after daycare, but that will make for a wonderful community amenity. I also appreciate, the attempt to minimize the parking. I would agree if it could find itself a little smaller, that would be great. I also think that there's an opportunity here to buffer the north edge of it, and the portion adjacent to the linear park, and really introduce maybe some bioswales, stormwater collection. If it is a necessity, let's make it as green as possible. The pedestrian circulation within the building is quite clear, and I like that porosity on the ground floor. I would agree with Ralph and Joe about that southeast entrance. I would like to see it be a bit more public fronting, more visible. And I think the community square would really benefit from having a more active frontage, if that sort of entryway was sort of more engaged with the plaza. It also seems that the community square, as others have mentioned, could benefit from further development, trees and soil cells. Again, water capture is really important here, as well as was mentioned, the large growing shade trees. So I look forward to seeing that develop. I found it a bit difficult at first to understand how pedestrians were moving through the exterior and the adjacent properties. Very complicated, but I think it's been explained now. And as you continue to progress the design, I'd really encourage you to take a look at how those interfaces work and function over time, over different conditions, as things open up. And I would love to see this portion of the linear park and potentially the portion north of the site to be opened up in conjunction with the project. There was also some early mention of food-centered programming, and I can't seem to locate anything about urban agriculture or the growing of food in the package. And if that is a consideration, that southern edge along the school where we have the chain link fence, where sunlight will be plentiful, might be a good place for it. It also then has adjacencies to your kitchen space, which also brings me to the barbecue area on the roof, and thinking about, should it be on the ground floor so it can relate better to the kitchen? Obviously some issues there with usage and control. So if it is on the third, maybe adding a small support space for that sort of food preparation would help. I think in terms of locating the building, I think it's located in a great spot along the linear park and that future east-west connection. So I think it's responding to the goals of the Lawrence Allen Public Realm Master Plan. And then I think the view terminus, as you develop the sort of community square and the ceremonial space, that I think that can be highlighted and enhanced. And then my final comment is try to work with the design team who's doing the draft plan of subdivision for Varna Road, you know, to really ensure that frontage is coordinated and that public space is carved out as needed along it. But very interesting project. Thank you for bringing it forward today.
Thank you, Jessica. We're going to move on to Jim Goff and then Meg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. It's good to see a really strong pedestrian focus, especially with the school coming next door. So the design and the orientation, I think, really reinforces the primacy of walking, hopefully minimizing driving to the site. And the development of the frontage road as well will help support sustainable transportation via cycling and transit as well. But I think I see minimal bike parking visible in the rendering, and I don't think it's shown on the plans. So I think that element should really be planned with the rest of the pieces, not as an afterthought. And I think it would be, I think a great deal more than 10 bike parking spaces are going to be needed. So I would make this an intended feature so that people don't end up doing things like locking their bikes to trees. With respect to the color palette and the stone and all that, I appreciate the thinking behind the color palette. And you only have to look at my garden to know I love a beautiful rock, but the base reads as kind of very muted and a bit featureless in the renderings to me. So I think, as others have said, something like some gradation of color or texture or some other feature of visual interest at the entrances, kind of like sort of a streak of quartz in the granite, for example, could make this feel more welcoming and more interesting as a community structure facing the plaza. The food bank I thought was a particularly great community supportive idea, and I do also support Jessica's comments about urban agriculture and the bioswales and some of the other things that she mentioned. Overall, I do think it's going to be a great addition to the community, so thank you for bringing it forward. That's it for me.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Meg, and then Michael and Paul. Meg. Are you on mute, Meg?
Yes, no, I'm not. Thank you to the city and the design team for bringing this here. I want to commend you for the drawing package. I also, the slide in particular, call out one slide in particular of the master plan and the reconnection of the surrounding context. We so rarely see context plans and a visualization of the thinking that's been, that's gone into the context plan. And sometimes that we wonder if that means they haven't been thinking about the project hasn't been thinking enough about the context, but here you clearly have, and it's thrilling. One of the design team said that imagining that this was carved out of a forest, and that is just such a beautiful and evocative place to start. And really, again, like the word I wrote down was thrilling. I just think it's very exciting. So I want to pause there for a second. Then I want to go to the interior, and and only to say that there are some glorious, elegant, and light-filled moments in the interior that are just, I think, also very exciting. And look forward to seeing more development of that. And that, I mean that like from a material perspective, and I think from a spatial and proportion perspective. Not as much from a plan perspective, and I'll talk about that towards the end. Although my comments are not going to surprise, they're similar to some of the other panel members' comments. I would say, as much as I enjoy, and I think the idea of, and this is similar too, of the rock and the tree house, there's an awkward relationship between the two elements. Like individually, I think that they're well conceived. It's where they meet. And so I would encourage you to look at that again. And I don't know what it means necessarily, and I wouldn't do that to go in and to modify your design. But I think that there has to be a mediating band where the of architecture, and it's not doesn't have to be bigger or smaller than what you've already presented, but something that actually makes that transition between the rock and the treehouse more successful. At the base, so we've been asked specifically to comment on the public realm. So moving down to the ground floor to grade, I question the ratio of glass to solid elements, and that comes out if the glass honestly feels a bit relentless. And the overall composition of the rock feels relentless and possibly unfriendly. And that's the opposite of what you're trying to do here. So I think it's something, and other members have made comments about whether, the ground level is too clean in a way, to use a new word, but featureless. I think that's a good place to start. Perhaps there's just more solid, there's less slickness at the base, there's more texture. I think that could help quite a bit. I mean, I understand how tight the site is, I think we all do, but the other thing I would suggest, if at all possible, is, because I wish for a softer, greener, more pedestrian-friendly edge, both on Varna, but also on the southern edge. And I know you've got a tough job there because you don't know what's coming. I don't know that given the amount of program that you need to have in here, it'd be challenging to make it more green on Varna and softer here. So it's both, I should say it's a combination of more green and also modifying the base architecture so that the two together are softer and more inviting and more welcoming. Fung acknowledged that it's early days for the landscape, so I'm glad to be seeing it at this point so that we can make these comments about that you may already be thinking about how to make that a more welcoming space. I also hope, and in the event that you can't make Varna greener, that the entry plaza and the square will be greener. Going back to this idea of it being carved out of a forest, I realize that the entry plaza is one, or the square rather, is one where you want to be able to host events, but I still think there needs to be some more green. It looks a little bleak at this point. Continuing on the ground plane, I wholeheartedly agree with Ralph's comment that more defined and welcoming, and this goes in hand with my earlier comment about the nature of the base in general, but there needs to be more defined and welcoming entrances. We need to be able to see them better or to understand them better. The scale of the one at the southeast needs to be brought down, and possibly the one at the closer to the daycare edge, the northwestern entrance as well. They need to be less slick. I think that they need to project, they need to have more texture around them. They really need to suck you in. And right now they're not doing that. Further to Joe's comment, and this is where I get into the planning of it. And again, acknowledging that it's a tough nut to crack, this one. The southeast entrance leads you directly not only into a stair, but into change rooms. And I do think that is a challenging condition because it is far away from the control desk and it's not good. So some deep thinking about that I think is also warranted. But it's very exciting and there's some really beautiful things going on here. So look forward to seeing it again when it's at its next stage. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Meg. Moving on to Michael and then Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, a lot of comments that I was thinking of making have been made. That may not keep me from saying them again. I love this project. What I love is that it starts with a clear strategy for its form and its planning, that it's a sophisticated and relaxed planning that has allowed all the forms to come together with open geometries, that the open geometries are meaningful. They're not just willful, but they actually make sense as you move your way up through the building. And that there's a sophistication in the building type by the design team in the way that they've deployed the wider spaces, the narrower spaces, the entry points, the separation of uses, the integration of uses, it's all performing at a really high level. So echoing a lot of what people have said. I also enjoy the contrast of the base and tower, although like others, there's more to say about that. But I think maybe my largest concern has to do with, even though the landscape design hasn't been completed, and respect that it's early days, I think that the landscape design of the edges as represented maybe doesn't have strong enough stories. And I would strongly recommend that each of the conditions currently represented by dashed line plus some landscape gets much more definition than it currently has, because it's hard to know whether that dashed line represents an existing fence that's going to be remain, or a property line, or an edge that is undefined. And in particular, I think it becomes most significant at the north edge where the parking is, and that relationship to the property to the north. What will that relationship be in a context where you want to have had a story to tell about the whole site, and in particular the edges? The linear park is a great idea. We also know that it's got a sound barrier wall. And I know that you may not have anything to do with it, but is there something about that sound barrier wall, the linear park, the north edge with the parking, the south edge along the fence, which will be retained, and square? What stories can you tell that have a level of intensity and have character-giving implications that aren't really just green with sprinkled trees? So I think this team is fully capable of doing that, and I think the project as a whole will be a lot better. With respect to the tablelands analogy, I think maybe a little bit more research is needed to understand where that could go. If you really want to go there, the geology of the site, of the Scarborough Bluffs versus the bedrock, those are two really interesting stories to take hold of. But I agree with all of my fellow panel members. At the moment, as rendered, I would say it isn't fulfilling your objectives, and it isn't textually or materially or even in terms of the details that are currently represented, nearly engaging enough. And a thought experiment I just did was, what if the texture of the tower and the base were inverted? That doesn't fulfill your intent, but the level of engagement that the reversing the materials would do is interesting to contemplate, I would say. A few last things. One of them is that be careful about wood slats and basketballs. They don't like each other. And also consider the long view down Varna Road from the north and where you're positioning your entrance. And at the moment, it's quite far west. And it's something that I know the tower is doing a lot of work for you, but sometimes you also like to actually see the entrance. Is there something about the sculpting the base that makes that a little more possible? Other panel members have covered many of the other issues I'm interested in. Thanks very much for this beautiful project.
Great, thank you, Michael. Last but not least, Paul.
Thank you. And I'll maybe just start by echoing a couple of things I've heard from others. The stone base wood lantern as a kind of metaphor is attractive. I think needs a little resolution in the details and the kind of texture and the quality of that. But is, I think, a very good approach, and one that could be really fruitful in its sort of ultimate execution. The net zero and the kind of commitment to sustainability is also well appreciated. And I think programmatically, both interior, exterior, landscape, community gardens is incredibly ambitious and kind of speaks to a kind of social resilience and reconciliation in a way that is sort of its time. And so we'd like to see how that resolves itself in the kind of implementation. Where I have some criticisms really with the site plan, and I think part of this is you're inheriting a lot of unknowns, I guess. And so we're all, I think, struggling with the sort of unknown of the school below, but also what kind of secondary plan that's now, 10, 15 years old, if not more. And so you're kind of stuck with a number of things that were decisions made once upon a time and are being implemented in a very incremental fashion. And then that kind of impacts the site planning. And so to be a little bit more specific, I'm struggling with the sort of community plaza as an idea relative to the kind of programming and its location. I think it's a wonderful idea. I like Heather's sort of comments around the kind of blank slate that gets filled, but I think it's lacking the kind of centrality of location relative to the main entrance and activity centers, right? You've got a kind of passive view to the pool. You've got the back of a storage wall and the back of an exit stair, and then very much the secondary entrance surrounding it. And so there's very few reasons other than kind of walking past it that you'd end up there. Meanwhile, on the opposite side, you've got very much the primary entrance, and then the daycare that's got an incredible cycle of people coming and going and pick up and drop off. And it'd be great if maybe those two got somehow wrapped or combined with the community plaza in a way that really starts to consolidate those activities and sort of builds at least 2/3 of the kind of frame around that plaza. Hopefully the school builds the rest. The daycare, I think there's a kind of struggle in my mind. You want to get it off the street and put it in the back where it's sort of safely tucked away. But that's also where the Allen Road is and where you've got lots of noise and particulate matter. And so would it not be better facing the park, facing the school towards the plaza, towards Varna Road, and sort of putting that on display as the kind of primary face rather than the kind of passive observation of the swimming pool? And so I'm starting to think, is there a kind of flipping programmatically? And then the second sort of the sort of follow-on piece is there seems to be I think building a bit on Michael's comments, a disconnect between the internal circulation, the kind of yellow spines, and the external circulation, right? The internal stuff, the main sort of north-south yellow spine connects you from the main entrance, obviously, in the pickup and drop-off, doesn't really get you anywhere on the south. The east-west one is very much the back end, but it's getting to your main community plaza and runs maybe parallel to an exterior pathway. And so is there a way to maybe better align those inside and outside circulation elements? Think of it as a kind of Noli plan where that yellow is part of the exterior, and start to rationalize it, maybe funnel people a little bit more to your kind of key destinations and through your key public spaces in a way that sort of is mutually supportive. And then lastly, Varna Drive is huge. It's, I think, 27 meters or more. I checked in the secondary plan. It looks like it's got 2 lanes in each direction. Let's put that pickup and drop off out there, put the buses out there, put it all out there, slow down the traffic, make it a safer street, and then take all that asphalt in the parking and give as much of that as back as possible to green space, to open space, to landscape, to play areas, to any of that. So, where possible, push onto the Varna Road, coordinate where we can with the school. I know that's sort of not much we can do at this point, but look to optimize that plan, I think, to really support the activity and kind of alignment of that with the destinations and the ambitions of the program. So thank you. But again, all that to say, kind of programmatically, sustainability and the kind of overall architectural party is very well received. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, panel members, for your comments. Excuse me. I realize we're a little bit behind schedule here, but I think that attests to the creativity and the intrigue of this project that's been brought to us today. I'm not going to go through each and every point. I'm just going to try to highlight some of the key, but not all of the key things that have been mentioned here today. Keeping in mind that we don't have a vote, but our excuse me, our comments count. And I think that there are a lot that are happening. The ones that I wanted to highlight or just touch on are the reception of the project. And these are in no particular order. Response to context, built form, and site plan. And within that, which really touches on all of these, the Indigenous heritage. I think the reception has been universally positive. Excuse me. that there is an excellent start to this. There is more work to be done, but there is an underlying idea or concept, that sort of diamond that you've created of an idea that has the strength to be carried forward. I think in terms of the response to context, as Meg has said, we don't often see projects where there should be a master plan and there isn't. And this is a change. Excuse me for a moment. Okay. And I think that is something that is really, really valuable in terms of how this design goes. I think that you've spent time acknowledging the master plan, telling us how the community center is in the very heart of it, and how you're going to mesh it into the future overall plan. And I think maybe some of the comments that are coming up would make you rethink again, remove the boundary lines of this particular project and expand back out again. The program is an epitome of serving the community and reaching out into the community. And I think some of the comments are coming from go back out again beyond the boundaries and then imagine how people approach it. Imagine where buses and cars should drop off. Imagine where a community center should be, where the entry points should be. I think all those comments are very telling. And I think the answers lie in looking back out and then coming back into the site. An example would be, I'd almost suggest that the bridge that will eventually go over Allen Road, that should almost be, I know it's not within the boundaries, but consider it now. Do that sort of thing that a lot of projects don't do, work outside the boundary as well as in. And many of the questions that have come through are about that, about the sound wall along Allen Road, about the public school that's to the south. All of those things are all connected. Similarly, I think the built form, there were lots of comments about the built form. And again, we feel that there's a very strong concept here that needs more work. And I think all the comments that have come through, that if you're going to be evocative of a history and a geology, that you can reach back into that too and come back out and determine what the tactility of materials are, how they are revealed from each other and how they will behave and how they will yet be welcoming. Because all of those geological forms happened before, weren't necessarily intended to be welcoming, but now we're trying to use those to create a space where people gather. And certainly there were comments about the materiality. One comment I'd have is the renderings may not fully capture what you're trying to do, but they seem to show portions of the treehouse being so opaque that the articulation of the facade is very hard to see, and that's where the beauty lies. So thinking about that. I think the last item is the Indigenous heritage. We're intrigued by how it has been infused into the things that people at first might not appreciate, the slight angle change of a building. It has such a rich story to it. The use of the materials, that's to be made richer. And the promise that you're going to carry this through the entire site and hopefully then infuse beyond the boundary by doing this. I think those are the key things. You've got something really quite magical here that still has a lot of work to be done, but we can see that the team is a very talented team and thinking deeply about this place and the use. We look forward to seeing it again. Thank you. So team members, panel members, we are definitely a little bit late. I think I'm going to suggest about 5 minutes of a break, and then we'll move on to the next project. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Okay, take care.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Here we are. Thank you for your patience. We're delayed a few minutes. We'll be starting very shortly. I'll wait till I see a quorum of panel members and we shall start. Let's see. 1, 2, 3. 4. I think we need 2 more and we can get started. While they are joining, I'll begin with the formalities. Good afternoon, everyone. Once again, thank you for your patience. Thank you for participating in the Design Review panel. Today's Wednesday, May 15th, 2024, third session of the day is 777 Victoria Park Avenue. It's a Housing Now project. This is a pre-application consultation. And then actually, Leanne, can you correct me on that? This is it still a pre-application consultation, Leanne?
Yes, I believe so.
Thank you. And a future site plan application and the second review of 777 Victoria Park Avenue Housing Now project. We have an hour and 10 minutes scheduled for the review. It's a formal review session, but as a PAC, no vote will be taken at the end. Staff have been given 10 minutes for their presentation. This will be followed by a 15-minute presentation from the proponent, and discussion will follow these presentations. The session is being live streamed on YouTube. It's also being recorded. The recording will be available at the City Planning YouTube channel following the meeting. To begin, I'll do a roll call. If you can tell me if you have a conflict of interest. So beginning with you, Paul. Paul, are you there?
I am. No conflict.
Thank you. Gordon.
No conflict.
Meg. Meg, are you there? Not seeing Meg just now. Is it possible, Gordon, that Meg is unable to be in this session? I think that's true.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
Yeah, we'll continue with Jessica.
Present, no conflict.
Juhi.
Present, no conflict.
Heather.
Here and no conflict.
Jim Goff.
Present, no conflict.
Jalobko.
Here, no conflict.
Ralph Giannoni.
Present, no conflict.
Did I miss anyone? Jim Melvin. I didn't, you're muted, but I saw you mouth present and no conflict.
No, sorry, present with a conflict.
With conflict.
I will observe. I won't participate.
Thank you for that clarification. Very good. For panel members, don't forget the staff questions. For presenters, I will verbally interrupt you with 1 minute left in your time to let you know that it's time to wrap up. Panel members, as always, commentary on issues of concern and of appreciation. And finally, if we can begin with the staff presentation.
Amy, sharing my screen.
Yes, we see your screen.
Okay, perfect. And can you see the presentation now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Junqi Wang. I am an urban designer in Scarborough District. My managership and PDRS project coordinator, Rosanna Trudeau, are also joining us today. Community planner Kwasi Kamkam on the file cannot attend due to meeting conflicts. As was mentioned, we are here to discuss the 777 Victoria Park Avenue development proposal in preparation of the upcoming park and site plan application. The development is under Housing Now initiative, which was launched in 2018, aiming at facilitating the delivery of affordable housing on city-owned land. Speaking of planning policies, the site is located to the south of Victoria Park subway station, which is designated as mixed-use area that will achieve a multitude of planning objectives by combining a broad array of residential uses, recreation, cultural activities, parks, and open spaces. To the north of the site is the subway line to utility corridor. To the west of the site, across Victoria Park Avenue, is the Dentonio Park. To the south and east of the site are lands designated as apartment neighborhoods. The subject site is zoned as commercial residential area as per zoning bylaw. A number of design guidelines are applicable for the development review, including Tall Buildings Design Guidelines, Growing Up Planning for Children in New Vertical Communities Guidelines, and Toronto Green Center version 4. The Tall Building Design Guideline talks about where tall buildings belong, transitioning to lower scale neighborhoods, as well as space building design to fit into the existing context and respect the scale and proportion of the adjacent streets and public roads, and maximum tower floor plate area as shown on the image to the right. Speaking of the site's context, as described earlier, the site is in proximity to Subway Line 2, Victoria Park Station, located within the planned Victoria Park Major Transit Station area. The bus terminal and its platform are to the immediate north and east boundary of the site. Regarding the built form context, to the west of the site across Victoria Park Avenue, it is dominantly 1 to 2 story low-rise neighborhood. To the northwest of the site is the Crescent Town apartment neighborhood with existing building ranging from 10 stories to 38 stories. To the south of the site, across the Denton Avenue, there are 19-story and 21-story tall buildings at 757 Victoria Park Avenue and 10 Macy Avenue. The site also boasts of green open space, parks and trails within walking distance. To the west of the site, across Victoria Park Avenue, is the Dentonio Park. To the far north of the site, across the subway rail corridor, is the Dentonio Park Golf Course and Taylor Creek Trails. To the far east and south of the site, there are a mix of parks and community recreation center. The site locates at the northwest corner of Victoria Park Avenue and Denton Avenue. The existing of the site use is a TTC surface parking lot. Victoria Park Avenue is planned with a width of 30-meter right-of-way, which has already been achieved. It is envisioned as a intermediate street type by Toronto Streetscape Manual Map, characterized by well-defined street wall, wide setback, significant street tree planting, or opportunities for such. Denton Avenue is a local street with a existing 20-meter right-of-way. Moving into the views of the site, see the key map to the left bottom of the presentation for the camera locations. Starting from standing at the exit of Victoria Park subway station, looking southwest along Victoria Park Avenue, where you can see the bus terminal access to the left and Dentonio Park to the right. Moving along Victoria Park Avenue, looking northwest, you can see the elevated subway line to the far north. and the curb cuts into the existing TCC parking lot and on the site in the image to the right. And then also from the image to the left, you can see the fence between the parking and the streetscape. Standing at the intersection of Victoria Park Avenue and Denton Avenue, looking northeast into the site, the grade change from the west to east is shown in the image to the left. Looking southwest across Victoria Park Avenue, the signalized intersection and existing low-rise neighborhood is shown in the image to the right. Looking east along Denton Avenue, the grade change from the street level to the site and from west to east are shown in both of the images. These are a series of views showing the interface between the site and the bus platform from the north, east, and southeast corner. Briefly introducing the application. In 2019, the rezoning application was brought to design review panel, shown as the reference concept in the image to the left. The comments for the reference concept have informed a design memo that contain design objectives for build form, path rail, and streetscape improvements. After the rezoning application was approved, a revised design concept has been advanced in 2024 as shown on the image to the right. The current concept is prepared for the upcoming park and site plan application. The current proposal contemplates a redevelopment of the site for a 12-story mid-rise building and a 34-story tall building. The proposed base building height is up to 8 stories. A 7-story component is proposed to connect the mid-rise base building and the tower podium. The proposed tower plate is 860 square meters. The proposed program includes residential, retail, and community facilities, which contributes to approximately 90,000 gross floor area. The proposed density is 6.26 FSI. Amongst the total proposed 705 units, 256 units are affordable units. Staff are seeking for the panel's advice of the following issues. First, building massing and design. Secondly, a grade use and streetscape along Victoria Park Avenue. That's the end of our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we'd like to progress to the consultant presentation, for which we have 15 minutes, and I will signal the 1-minute mark before the end of the presentation to help you know to wrap up. So if you can indicate who's presenting and maybe if there are any team members joining you today, and then we can start the presentation.
Sure. I'm Dermot Sweeney. I will be presenting on behalf of our firm and the project, and also Feng Li will speak to the landscape at the end. Do you have the presentation that we sent to put up? Someone? We were told it would be.
Okay.
Go.
There we go.
Excellent. Okay. I think if it's reasonable, I would just say next, if that's okay, to move the slides along. That's good. The land acknowledgement. Have you done this previously? Okay. All right then. So basically, you saw what we've done recently has been joined the team and rethought the project in a number of ways, taking into account comments that had been made by the city in the past, looking at building efficiency, pulling things back from the street, freeing up the ground plane, moving the public aspects of the project community benefit type space out to and live in the street, animate the street, and create as much public landscape space as we could along the face. And in doing so, we brought the buildings back from the street, thinned them down, reduced the bulk of the buildings, but also increased some of the height, and thin down some of the other components so that we could get better units. Next, please. You've got the site. Next one. The planner did urban design did a very good job on that. So obviously the things that are important to us as designers and as architects and urban designers and landscape was to look at how do we start with the street. It's a difficult street in many ways. Generally an arterial road that starts south and goes all the way up very far north. Typically it's made up with either houses, low form housing, or single story retail, and in some cases some apartment buildings. But generally it's fairly low. We were looking then to maintain that sort of character and context by pulling the taller portions of the building further back and opening up the site on the Victoria Park side to be more contextual with lower rise buildings and stepping back to the taller buildings. We've also got a fairly significant grade change, which is allowing us to do some interesting things. But we also thought that comments about the bus platform and the bus circulation, access to the station, and announcing the station to people moving from Danforth North, or in fact on either side of the street, that we would be able to see it quite clearly and also have a public space out in front. Next, please. Okay. Basically, we've acknowledged, I think, the general requirements and desires of CreateTO, the City of Toronto, and the developer to try and come up with a very strong, more simplistic, but reasonably elegant scheme. And I'll take you through it now. Next, please. So basically what happened was we went back and studied how we could thin up the buildings, giving less depth to the residential blocks, allowing greater exposure to the outside wall and a wider width. So the units got wider, less deep, greater exposure, and simplified those units within both the affordable block and of course the regular market block. In doing so, by thinning them up, we were also able to push them back from the street, pull one-story components out towards the street, which would allow greater access and easier access to outdoor landscape space, a wider, more treed streetscape, but also better connection to the community center and the daycare, as well as the lobbies for the buildings and some retail. Next, please. This is just a progression from, on the upper left, you see what was the project. We started out again by simplifying volumes, trying to pull the building back. There was also a problem in the angular plane of the initial building, that it was well within the angular plane at the top of the building. By pulling back in the blue form middle top, you can see we've pulled that back and are no longer in the angular plane, as you see in the bottom right. We then wanted to establish a little bit more building on the street, on the south side on Denton. So we did a lower block there, stepping down towards the south, towards Danforth, but also establishing a reasonable street edge. We then looked at tower placement. We wanted the tower to be also set back, thinner, longer, a little deeper, less deep, sorry, and a little longer in the north-south direction, giving us better access to units, and also allowing for the potential to connect the two buildings in an alignment. We then looked at starting to break down the middle bottom, started to break down the forms to add a little bit of complexity, a little bit of interest, breaking down some of the verticality, creating a more horizontal effect along the street. The blocks themselves, as we developed the notions and the ideas, we started to look at various languages, which I'll take you through, but the bottom right is an important diagram showing taller means more ground plane, freeing up the ground plane, freeing up the street edge, and pulling the buildings back out of the angular plane. Next, please. This basically shows a number of strategic moves that were made to animate the street. The bottom left shows active elevation all the way along and around the corner onto Denton. I think that's really important. Also, the setback of certain uses such as the daycare and the community center and some of the lobbies to create more open space. And you'll see on the top, on the bottom diagram, upper left, opening up, pulling the building back allowed us a very good view, which I'll show you later, of the Victoria Park station. Circulation is simplified. There's one route in, one route out. It's straight through, one off Victoria, back out to Denton, Denton to Victoria. Simple loop giving access to drop off for daycare, community center, access to parking and loading for the facility. Okay, next. Ground floor, all the way along, you can see there's the pass at the top, PAS at the top to open up public view and connectivity to the station. The non-residential use will be retail, hopefully a great cafe, restaurant, or a good retail space out towards the street, but also activating the PAS. We also have the residential lobby on that northern block. The south block is given over mostly to community uses, the child care center and the community center on the bottom right. Both, again, full exposure to the street, lots of space around them, landscaped open space in front of them. The child care outdoor area will be immediately adjacent and accessible and facing south and west. And then we've taken the lobby for the second building around onto Denton to live on that side and give ease of access as well. Loading and everything is pulled to the back of house, all that good stuff. Each has independent loading, but they're all taken off of the main single passage through the site. Next, please. Again, what we have is a passageway through. On the left is the previous design. There was a forecourt and a separation of the buildings, which meant they were generally larger floor plates and out towards the street. We've pulled everything back and allowed for that one-story portion to come out and sort of mediate between the street and the taller buildings at the rear, and also give ourselves much more space and greater ease of access into the community amenities. Next, please. These are just some of the buildings we're currently having just finished or are working on, and others that have been inspiring to us. We wanted something, as we approach the exterior design of the building, to be reasonably simple, somewhat consistent, but also interesting and more classic in its approach. Next, please. We also, I'm a big believer, although hard to get this through sometimes, so maybe you can help us with this. I'm just kidding. But I do want to see a lot more color in the project, and we've started to really play around with the color within the facades, within the grid, which I'll show you soon. These are just some of my favorite flowers. If you believe that, I have land in Florida. No, I'm just kidding, just joking. Okay, next. So really, the idea here was to look at a fairly simple modular expression that we could then adapt in different ways to a more horizontal and a more vertical expression, and start to play up and distinguish or delineate the various blocks of the building, but still have them consistent so that it all looks like one complex, but broken down into smaller component pieces as it gets closer to the street, typically. Next. Yeah, I think I can come back to this if there is any. I'll come back to this if there are questions about sustainability or what we're doing, but certainly we're working well within V3 Tier 2, and we're looking at a whole series of technologies to do that. These are some of them. Next, please. These are views I'm going to take you through fairly quickly of the project. As we developed the ideas for the project, it was an interesting sort of balance between horizontal blocks and a horizontal expression, one that is much more vertical in the tower and the end of the tower, and then the simpler, more modular, less horizontal or vertical components, adding more interest basically to the defined blocks on the site. Next, please. These are various views coming around. Now, of course, in preparing for this today, I looked at that and I thought the very tallest vertical part is maybe a bit much, but I'll tone that down a little bit. But I do like the fact that each block is distinguished. It's within a sympathetic set of materials and can be read both as a large building, but also in complex, but also a series of component parts that are distinguished three-dimensionally as well. Next, please. Just another view looking north and west at the building at the rear. I think it was also important along that rear face to provide a sidewalk and a more reasonable edge to the bus drop-off and platform at the rear. You can see in the very middle, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but that where the actual vehicular entrance through the site, we've actually bridged the building as a component, tying the two together. Next. These are shots at the ground plane, looking up and down the street. This is looking south and west at the large public space that would be on the northwest corner, giving visual connectivity to the station itself, which I think is really important to move the building back and create a building space or an outdoor public space beside the station. Next. This is looking the other way, so you can see actually what I was speaking about. The station itself is very exposed visually, and you can connect to it all the way from Danforth up as you walk up the street. Next. You're starting to see a little bit of the play with color. We're still refining that, but I think it'd be very interesting to work with the palette of colors within a more pale white or light gray structure, which is precast, and then start to play around with the individual panels. Next, please. Another view of the street, further south looking north along the street edge. Next. And this is a view of the entrance to the community center, which has very significant prevalence on the site. It is very visible, very easily accessible, and open and inviting, and becomes almost a pavilion unto itself out front of the building, with the lobby further down Denton Street to the residential building. So we're moving the public or community-based amenities out to the street with very prominent and simple entry points. Next. Just another view, the corner, looking back along Denton towards Victoria Park. Next. I would ask now if Fung could do a quick review of the landscape.
You've got about a minute left.
A minute? Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries, Dermot. There's a lot to go through. So I'll go through very, very quickly. I'll get to the plans. Then, you know, lots of inspiration here, you know, in Scarborough, and predominantly for sure this significant Taylor Massey Creek watershed, I think, is a huge source. Next slide. And so just like three very high level, you know, conceptually anyways, and approach to the landscape, definitely celebrating that ecological heritage from the Taylor Creek watershed. Certainly we're bringing a lot of people here, you know, to the site. How can we maximize these opportunities to engage and allow people to kind of use the space and let it be flexible to the changing population here? And then also for sure, like thinking about that, you know, there is going to be a large part of this landscape being people commuting and going to the Victoria Park Station, and these, you know, public contributions to the space, and having really good seasonal interest all year round through planting and features. Next slide. And I'll just go through these super quickly. And so, like, you know, it was kind of looking at like, how can we nestle this development, this former parking lot, and nestle this development and really, like, you know, replace the square footage of parking lot with really, you know, functional, beautiful landscapes. Next slide. And also, again, like maximizing engagement through, furnishings, quality materials, and lots of like natural materials as well. Next slide. And also like celebrating the seasons through planting, as I mentioned, it could be through sculpture and lighting. Next slide. And then finally, just, our current landscape concept plan. And so from a functional site plan point of view, you can see that our 2 publicly accessible spaces. So north is page left, south page right. So you can see at the northwest corner, as Dermot mentioned, our plaza, where we do anticipate, a lot of the residents, kind of moving through this space to the station, and the public, of course, along the sidewalk, trying to create really, instead of a pedestrian corridor, trying to create really beautiful spaces that you can pass through, but also occupy and sit in. At the southwest corner, as Dermot mentioned, the community entrance, we have a great kind of more urban forecourt at that location. And as well, that is the kind of general typology also for all of the, the 2 residential lobbies as well. You can see on Victoria Park on the sort of the north block there, and then on Denton at the south there. And then also that treatment of that central, kind of, lay-by parking and kind of entrance forecourt, we're calling it, that we want to really treat that in a very pedestrian way. And also in terms of, intuitive wayfinding, so that people could find their way to the daycare entrance at that location, and in a similar, kind of heightened material palette, let's say at the community entrance as well, so that people know kind of, where those key entrances are. And at the northeast corner is our amenity terrace. And I should mention that we are accommodating on the ground floor anyways, certainly 2 dog runs, being that we're going to have a lot of people, a lot of animals. It's always the kind of #1 thing that comes up, certainly with new developments in an existing community.
We're out of time now.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I think
That's fine.
I think we've got the picture, and those images and this plan help a lot. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Hopefully you didn't have anything more to say.
Just the last slide, for what it's worth anyways, is just of the upper amenity, and just to kind of demonstrate meeting all the TGS stuff anyways.
Sounds good. Very good. Panel members, we've got 5 or 7 minutes for questions of clarification. I'm going to get my list of participants. Here we go. And if you could put up your virtual hand, I'll know that you've got a question. Oh, an actual hand, Gordon. I see that. We'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a quick question about the image that's on the screen right now. Left-hand side, so that'd be the northwest corner. What is the circulation pattern in that area? I'm trying to understand whether all that hard space. I'm trying to make sense of whether it all needs to be hard space. The question that goes with that, I understand that there may be a fence that extends on the north edge of the property that separates the bus route. How far does that fence go west?
Yeah, I can answer that. And I think, yes, the site plan. Okay. And I can start annotating now. All right. So yes. So most critically, maybe to understand anyways, that there will be that existing. So right along this edge here is about like 8 or 10 foot high. It is a significant barrier anyways between our site and the existing bus loop, I guess, if you will. And in terms of the pedestrian circulation, to answer your question, and so actually maybe the ground floor site plan might be an easier, for clarity's sake, might be it'll be the plan just before this one. If we could show that one, I could explain the.
Go back a slide.
Maybe if we could go back a slide. I'm sorry, I'm not sure who's.
There we go.
Thanks so much. Sorry, I have to request annotation again. Okay, so what we anticipate is that certainly, of course, along the streetscape, towards Vic Park, and I think the entrance is sort of somewhere around there. We also anticipate people from certainly from the residential lobby to move through the space. They can kind of do that, as well as coming through and then onto the sidewalk as well. There will be an amenity area here that will have an access out as well, and possibly still a little bit TBD, but like possibly a kind of entrance door there. There will be for the residents anyways, we do anticipate that there might be a desire, and especially in light of the dog run here and probably a dog spa at the ground floor, but there will be residents as well. There could be a desire line that does this as well, and out.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Next, I have Ralph, Joe, and Heather. So we'll start with you, Ralph.
Oh, great. Wow. Never get to go first.
Oh, no, this is only for your question of clarification,
Oh, great.
not
Okay,
for
great.
your
Oh my
presentation.
God, sorry. So can you explain the daycare playground? It's at grade? Because there's a rendering, I think, looking towards it with a very colorful screen-like element, but is it on the second floor of that, or?
Yeah.
That's one question.
It's on the ground floor.
It's on the ground floor, and I think our urban designer kind of touched on it lightly. There is a grade change, and so there is a grade change. So along Victoria Park, where we're rising quite a bit. This daycare playground will be at the ground floor, flush with the building, and so in essence, there will have to be a little bit of a retaining wall, and then on top of that retaining wall, there will have to be a guard.
Right.
And so essentially from the street, it will be, it will be sunken from the street, but it's basically at the ground floor anyways.
Okay. And
that answers your question. Okay.
And so that's a screen that I'm looking at in that rendering. There's one
retaining wall and then a guard that well, it's a guard, not just a guard. It's actually to separate the daycare playground from the public. So it goes up a little higher. I think it's 6 feet, 1.8 meters.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes, a screen. Okay.
With a sign but where the sign Northern Willow Child Care Center is.
That's right.
Okay, great. And can you explain those 2 parking spaces directly under the Note main entrance forecourt? What are those for?
Those are drop off for the daycare as well. There's additional parallel parking to drop off children for the daycare.
Okay.
Great. That's it from me.
Thanks, Ralph. Next, Joe, and then Heather.
2 questions, please. One is what's the why the linkage element between the 2 buildings? What purpose does it serve? It feels a little crowded in some of the views. I'm just wondering why that. Tell me a little bit about the story of that linkage element. I gather it belongs to the Market building. What's the story there? The second question is, loved the slide of precedent images and the evolution of the aesthetic of the building that you've shared with us. A lot of that really connects with those precedent images, with the exception to me of the south end of the tower, which has a different expression. Can you speak about why that change of language, given the commentary about keeping it simple, kind of consistent, and some of the language seems inconsistent with the south end of the tower. I'd just like to understand more about that architectural language. Thank you.
Sure. I'll go first question. Yes, the Market can extend across the Market housing. And in fact, the opposite could occur as well. We're digging and diving into the program quite clearly, but currently the Market housing comes across, sharing the elevator lobby and exit stairs. We wanted to connect the forms and create basically shutting down the site from vehicular or people wandering through. The idea was to connect the two buildings, make it obvious that it was one complex, but in doing so, set it back, set it down. It's lower than the block beside it to the south, and it's much lower than the block to the north. So I think it came from the alignment of the tower and the main body of units on the south, and it was all connected with an interesting sort of tunnel through. And then we broke that down and wanted to emphasize the break down some of the volumes. So we made it a little less dominant, but I still like the idea of saying that this is the front of the site, the more public side of the site. The balance is really for circulation, drop off, servicing. The second question I hinted at during the presentation, if we could go to one of the views, if you could go back to one of the views that shows one of the first views, be great. I did hint at the fact that I think now that I'm staring at it today, to look at it again, it's probably a little over the top. I personally think there's enough buildings that are screaming out, look at me, throughout the city. But we wanted to delineate that portion. And when we first did it with simply the vertical expression, the stronger vertical within the palette of the three that I showed, it was too much alike to the balance, and we wanted to really set something off that delineated, a stronger component. I find this is too strong personally, so I'd like to make it more like the tower language on the left. So that's something I recognize needs some calming down. Good work, Joe.
Thank you. Last is Heather.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm just wondering, what is the materiality that's proposed for the white material? Is it top hat or brick or precast?
Yeah, we're looking at precast panels. It's something we can get a lot more interest in terms of the form or the pattern of the surfacing.
Perfect. So more like the precedents that you're showing.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And then the color that I note extends all the way up the tower. Is that going to be delivered in the form of back painted glass, or what's your ideas for the color?
If the problem I have, I mean, I love back painted glass and we use it quite a lot. However, I think in this instance, it would be too shiny, too reflective. I want to calm it down and make it more reasonable. It's very difficult. The back painted glass I love is where you acid etch or satinize the front face, but that's expensive, so that won't be happening. But I do think that we do it within or onto a metal panel.
Okay.
And the panel could be insulated. So something a little softer, less shiny.
Okay, great. On the ground floor plan, the access off of Victoria Park, is that right in, right out? Is it one lane? Actually, the landscape plan seems to show that it's one.
I think there seems to be a problem with the arrow. It does look like a one-way route. Is that correct?
I think we're still in discussion around that. I mean, we're going to have to engage a little bit more with the city in terms of garbage and pickup and things like that. I think we're far enough from Denton, and Denton being a less significant street, and certainly with the station and then the park north of us, I think we could probably do a two-way, right in, right out, left in, left out, whatever. And that may be required for the garbage truck circulation, loading, and whatever. I think that would be our preference, but it's still under study.
Okay. And then
what would your preference be?
Well, it looks very clearly on the rendered landscape plan, not this plan that's on the screen right now, that it's one way on off of Victoria Park, but I didn't know how that would work. And then it's two-way around the back. And I mean, we're so behind time right now, so I feel badly taking up more airtime, but I was wondering if this curb cut on Victoria Park.
To make it two-way.
Yeah, I was actually wondering if it was just the daycare that was actually kind of forcing this second curb cut for the project. But anyway, sounds like it's still under study. So that's fine. And then I'm just wondering, above the linking element, between the market housing and the affordable housing, I'm just wondering what that facing distance is between primary windows of units in that location. It's for not very many floors, like 6 floors or something like that.
Well, I think the first answer I would give is that I think we can do the north wall of the lower building without primary windows. It sets up as a long, thin bar, so the main living space would be either facing east or west, and as would the bedrooms. So I think we can do that as a solid wall, and then the tower itself would have windows. Again, most of the windows would be facing east-west, but there would be some on the south as well.
Is it a very tight dimension there?
I think it's about 9 meters or 10 meters.
Okay.
Face to face.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, it's 11. It's actually 11 meters. It is
11 meters. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So it's the same as 2 mid-rise buildings beside.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. And thank you, everyone. I need to ask, I mean, we're quite beyond time. We're meant to be concluding at 5:35. It's 5:26 right now. Can I ask if everyone's okay if we continue on to 5:45 or 5:50? Or is that too late?
Okay with me.
Okay, well, let's do that. So we'll we have 8 panel members tonight. We'll take 2.5 minutes each. Self-governed, that's okay. So I'll implore you to be mindful of the time, and just to demonstrate that I know that this person could do it, I'm going to start with Ralph.
Yes. I will go really quick. I think it's an immense improvement over both the as of right and the first time that we've seen this. Clearly, of course, the kind of dose of reality with regards to efficiency, unit sizes, and the relationships has probably informed it. But of course, I'm assuming that is the case. That's what you said. So I think, and I really love this aesthetic approach. The massing, I think, is really exciting. It kind of looks like either a set of drawers that you're pushing out of different sizes, or a set of boxes that are kind of placed in a more complex and complementary way. So I buy that. So my comments are kind of language a little bit, and then just kind of cleaning up opportunities. I'm going to start with easy ones. One is, we all know that we would rather not have parking spaces perpendicular in front of buildings facing Victoria Park. If we're talking about creating an amazing public realm, that just is probably not a good condition. I think it should be just another great opportunity for embellishing what is already a pretty sophisticated experience. I think there's enough lay-by parking in the 6 spots that are there, or at the very least, you can go perpendicular off the rear and maybe carve a little bit out of the daycare, or reshuffle the deck on the interior a little bit to allow that to happen, and put more spaces in the back if need be. But I strongly suggest that it would be a real shame to actually have those spots, and then probably creates havoc when those people have to back out regardless. So that's that one. I'm going to make a plea. I know it's really challenging. The public open space facing the station, private amenity space, what a shame. I think that commercial space would be what should be there, or else it's just a kind of opening and really kind of an odd condition that, again, it needs fences and all that to kind of stop people from wrapping around it. So again, I think, there are those 24-hour retail. You don't have to man it. I think they'd love to be there. Something that allows commercial space to exist, evolve over time. I think if we're talking about the future, I think a station will need something at the corner, great coffee shop, bakery, whatever. And if you don't put it in, you're never going to have it. With regards to the massing, I think Joe and Heather were right on with regards to the I think it's like Sesame Street. One of these things is not like the other one thing that doesn't belong. I think that long, tall tower element just doesn't belong. There's this great sophisticated play of a grid that's creating opportunities. I think that's what it should be. And I'm actually wondering whether it should be a stumpy L shape singular reading, and maybe that's one thing. And the other thing is the bridge element. Maybe instead of just being stuck between two volumes, can actually interlock into that tower potentially and create a more interlocking detail similar to the one at the north end at a different scale. This building kind of color reminds me of a really amazing office conversion at Yonge and Davisville built a few years ago. Puts a smile on my face. I like purple. So I think if there's a way to in a sophisticated way, imbue a little bit of a shade of something, I think I'm all in for that. And again, the last thing is the lower pieces, just like all the larger pieces or boxes, I think that community space, the lobby, those should be discrete boxes sliding underneath. I think there's just a little bit of cooking in the oven that's needed to make them, again, discrete pieces looking like they're sliding out and under and not slamming in. And I think those are just details that are just going to make this project even more sophisticated. I really love this really exciting apron of active, experiential outdoor space facing Victoria Park. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. Next, I'm going to go Paul, Gordon, Jessica. And then after that, Juhi, Heather, Jim, and Joe. So starting with you, Paul.
Last to second, not bad. Thank you, Chair. I'll try to keep it brief. I think the changes and the evolution, and especially the way you've communicated it from the last scheme, are very well appreciated. I think there's sort of a apartment neighborhood character here that I think we should sort of defer to some of the positive elements of that. And I think those deep setbacks and the kind of green landscaped piece, I think, is a natural reaction and sort of speaks to that character. And I think your evolution has done that. And I'm wondering if maybe we even try to double down on it and get a little bit more of a deeper setback. And are there ways to maybe shift some of that daycare? So part of that affordable housing mass actually sits over that service driveway, drop a couple columns in and have the driveway tuck in underneath almost to a zero lot line condition, and then in exchange get an even deeper setback, maybe a bit of a buffer for that daycare. Similarly, I'm wondering if that sort of private open space, I think that's what it is on the extreme north end, if there's sort of a flip. And then to Ralph's point, put the retail perhaps at that extreme edge just as you're entering the station. And then you start to get that open space, the daycare and the other open spaces in a kind of continuous green thing that has a little bit more substance would be well appreciated. I think the very shallow floor plate on the affordable piece is attractive. I think, again, sort of consistent with what's in that neighborhood. Those 60s buildings are fantastic for these wide, shallow units where everyone's got a window and every kid's got, you can have these 3-4 bedroom things that have windows. So look forward to see how that evolves. And then I'll kind of echo, I think, what Ralph was saying around some of the architectural expression. I think the precedents are on the right track, and there's a kind of singularity and a kind of clarity to the grid on them, and maybe sort of eliminating one of those elements from the composition currently will get you to that kind of clarity of form that you see in the precedent. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Gordon next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Looking at the changes from the earlier, just back in 2019, it's great to see that there's been some careful moves made to improve on such a challenging site. I do remember the challenge of it. I'm going to focus on two things. One will be the built form character, and the other one is sort of landscape / site plan. I'll do the built form character first. I agree that there's a bit too much of a frenetic kind of feeling going on, and I think that tall, slender tower element at the south of the tower is an example of that. I keep thinking about the project that was called Scrivener Court. It was just south of the Summerhill Station on Yonge Street, and a version that we saw of it back around 2018, 2019 It was a collection of elements and moves, but they all had the same basic approach. And then they emphasized the sort of two-story elements in order to sort of create that scale comparison to the existing context. And I'm wondering whether something like that might work on this project, on this design, keeping in mind what you had said earlier about simplicity, and then let the color accents maybe do the thing that gives you a little bit of a jazz or a syncopation to it. Maybe there's one element that uses one of the colors. Maybe there's another one that uses the other color to solely, and then you do a mix. But there's simplicity, but you're using something that in terms of the color that can actually make that difference while you're keeping it fairly simple. I think then looking at the landscape now, my question earlier is when I heard about the landscape and the concept and the parks that were nearby, that sense of a lush landscape on a very contained site really is interesting. And the west side is the side to do it. And so I start looking at the plan and I'm thinking, okay, where can you cut back on the hard surface so that you can start to put in more green? Because this will be the only part of this particular site where that happens. And what would happen if you paid as much attention to creating a thicker, more luxurious green and taking it up onto the terraces that are above? And I don't currently see that in some of the plans. I do see something that sort of talks to this in the landscape presentation. If you did that, I think that then all of a sudden that busy street Victoria would be buffered, and that you would also have all those amenity spaces that do have a terrace. They get to enjoy that sense of almost being in one of the parks while being in quite a densely populated site. And those are my comments. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Gordon. Jessica.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation, and it's really great to see this project come back again. For time's sake, I'm going to stick to landscape comments. And first, I wanted to echo, I totally agree with Ralph on those perpendicular parking spaces. It's just a condition that creates sort of dangerous moments. It's one I deal with on a daily basis, and it's kind of treacherous. So I think working with the lay-by parking to achieve that and then open up that entrance into the daycare area, I think that would go a long way. I think like there's some really interesting things happening, and I kind of want to continue to learn more about it. Like for instance, what kind of screening is happening along the service driveway and that back amenity area. There's probably lots of opportunities to start to bring some of the screening like you have for the daycare playground around the other sides of the property to sort of buffer some of the other uses. The community center entrance seems very hardscaped and sort of it's only kind of got one bench right now. So I think it could use a bit more attention moving forward. I know there is some grading issues there, but maybe a little bit more of a celebration of that corner would be nice. And the sort of open space at the north end near the station entrance, it's really almost acting like a transit plaza. So again, those retail frontages Ralph talked about, I think are really important, and also increasing the sort of amount of seating. It might be just a natural place where people are going to congregate, whether they're waiting for someone coming from the station or whether they're going to cross at the crossing there. And then just a final comment on the dog run at the southeast corner. Feels a little like a leftover space, and I'm just wondering if this is the one between the bus drive lane and the rear sort of service driveway. Is it going to attract people to go there to walk their dog? It to me isn't seeming like a place where I necessarily want to hang out with my dog when there's a beautiful sort of ravine space across the street and other areas. So I question whether it would function better for maybe a stormwater capture, or a tree canopy might not work with the buses, but probably stormwater capture. So just something to consider there. The last thing you'd want is sort of like an unused fenced space in this already sort of fenced back condition. Really excited to see where this goes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jessica. Juhi.
Thank you. I thought the presentation was really great to follow along the design process and the changes that happened since we last saw this. Especially it was great to see that the sustainability strategy has been further developed since the first review. I mean, the approaches are all great. I think the only comment I would have is that the current proposed glass to wall ratio does seem a bit high at 60 to 40. So if you look at an opportunity maybe to lower that a little bit would help the building performance. I thought it was a great first step. Yeah, I think you mentioned the package mentioned that you're reducing the embodied carbon by limiting the underground parking. Again, it really encourage you to look at opportunities further beyond that and to look at sort of the materials that you're procuring for this development. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juhi. So Heather, Jim, and Joe, starting with you, Heather.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I think you're going to be getting lots of comments in the same buckets here, but I really appreciate, like Ralph and others, the evolution of this project, and what I really like about it is this. Actually, I like the linking bridge and this kind of all-in-one development where you just don't see the difference between market housing and affordable housing. So it's all sort of one indistinguishable project. So I appreciate that. I really appreciate, like others have said, the precedents on page 13. I liked, Dermot, that you sort of gave some self-criticism during your presentation, and agree entirely that south L leg of the tower just needs a bit of work there. It's feeling, as others have said, a bit foreign to the other architectural language. It would have been great to see some elevations, I think, in the package would have actually, I think, made us appreciate the project a little bit more. I like Ralph's description of the kind of drawers pulling out, but I also see the project as being quite bookended and some nice proportions that are very difficult to get only from the perspectives on pages 17, 18, and 19. Floor plans also would have been appreciated. A few key ones. I would have liked to have seen the dimensions on those facing conditions, and understand a bit better how the main primary faces of some of those suites were being handled, but was happy to hear your answer to that question, Dermot. And then just the last comment, I agree entirely about the dog run, and where the one adjacent to the bus platform. These dog runs are very, very stinky, and I think that all of those people waiting for buses it's just not a happy location for that. So I really like some of the suggestions others have made, really activating that edge rather than having a fence and making this project really feel like an island. You know, I understand there's probably some liability issues there, but I think that corner needs a bit more work with respect to some planning there of uses. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Jim, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation. I thought that was really very well communicated. There's very few comments from the transportation perspective that haven't been said already. I think it works. It works for access generally. I do agree with Ralph regarding the perpendicular parking spaces. I think they'd be better accommodated further back, both in terms of minimizing vehicular conflicts and also maximizing the pedestrian space in front of the development. Like Heather, I was a bit uncertain about the direction of the driveway until I looked at it a little more closely, but I'm sure you can work it out. I do think one-way operation should be able to work there, which would keep things nice and simple. I don't see any bike parking in the front of the development, but I think considering the type of development, it would be quite advisable to have some there for short-term bike parking, and possibly there, can't remember if there's a bike share space at the station. There probably is, so you probably don't need one here. But I think it would be good to have designated bike space designed into the frontage so that it doesn't happen haphazardly with bikes kind of attaching themselves to every possible vertical element there. And I do finally support the idea of color, and I'd like your flower choices, Dermot. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Last but never least, Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. I very much like the starting with building form, the kind of precedent imagery provided, and also in the renderings, the detailed exploration of that, especially along the ground plane, the kind of more intimate views. So I think there's a lot of promise in the palette of material that is under a review, and in the development of form within a kind of limited range of language. There's a fair bit of variety in what is actually a fairly long building from north to south. And I think there's a very good effort underway to, break that up in a way, but within a limited range of language, there's still a sufficient diversity of form and variety that gives it a really great character. With the exception, as others have said, and I implied in my question, of the south end of the tower, which you've acknowledged you're going to potentially revisit, and I think that could quiet down a whole bunch, and it would be just fine. With respect to the bridge, I like Heather, I really like the fact that this feels like a project, that it's not like there's the affordable building and it's obvious, and there's the market building and that's obvious, that there's a kind of continuity of expression, even though there's a real variety of form. I have, notwithstanding all of that, I have mixed feelings about that bridge. I guess I would just, I wonder whether it has a more distinct architectural language, or it has a distinct program, or what happens if it's not there at all. I don't think it's a critical component. It may cause some challenges, and there may be benefit to breaking up what is, as I said a minute ago, a very long north-south form. With respect to the landscape, just building on other commentary, and one observation, I think you are making accommodation for a retail space just north of the residential lobby of the tower. You don't know if you have any flexibility to make that retail space larger, and potentially without reducing the amenity area. I'm a bit concerned about that dog run in the northeast corner. Appreciating the commentary about the other dog run. If there's in fact a very tall fence that is going to be required, it's not going to go away. The TTC will insist on it all the way along the north and east boundary. Then I question that location for a dog run and encouraging, just sort of anybody to wander back there. And I wonder if that you could expand amenity space there potentially, and bring the dog run out to the street. That make that kind of plaza to the west of the amenity, what you call the amenity terrace, I guess. If that has more kind of street presence and maybe just a bit of a rethink on its landscape character, a hangout spot for people, they can bring their dog down and have a chat. Hang around, they're waiting for somebody at the subway, but that kind of north end of the landscape plan, I would just suggest that a larger scale may be examined a little more, and avoid any kind of safety issues of sort of this dark back corner that is contained by a fence, and it just may be an odd spot. I'm just thinking of people going up there late at night with their dog, and nasty stuff could happen. I don't know. I'd rather have it out on the street, more public, good lighting, that sort of thing. Overall, a really great project for Victoria Park. Looking forward to seeing it built. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, panel members, and thank you to the applicant for being flexible about our time this evening. Joe, I think you caught all the major points in your summary. And so, that the built form has evolved in a good way, that the precedents indicate the direction of material exploration in a good way, that the palette has promise, that we talked earlier in one of the previous project reviews about unity and diversity. I think we're seeing here unity and diversity in one project, and that that expression, except for the tower, in most opinions, and except for the bridge in some opinions, is headed in a good direction. There's a strong recommendation to not have cars backing into the driveway, and so to try to move those cars away, and some good suggestions about rethinking the dog run and where that might go. One of the things we don't know, which will have a huge impact on this project and site and quality of life, is what is the nature of that fence. And I don't believe I saw any suggestions about what that would be, that tall fence that will be required by the TTC. Of course, it's going to be one of the major character defining elements. So something to get this talented design team on and have it be part of the building, not have it be something superimposed and foreign to the rest of the building. So with that, I think we can say thank you very much for a provocative project, for a development of an architectural type that unifies market housing and affordable housing in a good way, and embracing the possibilities of sustainability. Oh, one thing, yes, that window to wall ratio, really important that you look at that carefully. So with that, thank you very much, panel members, applicant, for a full day of compelling and in some cases challenging projects, but not this one. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Those were good comments. I agree with the vast majority of them. That's very good, at least for, I think they're very, very constructive criticism. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thanks so much. Yes, great
Everybody.
comments. Yeah. All right. Have a good evening, everyone.
Have a good evening,
Everybody.
everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.